All right, if you will, come on in and let's give these young men your attention. And we'll go ahead and get started with our worship. All right, tonight AJ will be first, Joseph will be second, and then LJ will be third. LJ and Mac. All right. If you will, go ahead and turn your books to number 915. That'll be the Song of Invitation. 915.
867, 867, first verse. To Canaan's land I'm on my way. To Canaan's land I'm on my way, where the soul of man never dies. My darkest night will turn to day, where the soul of man never dies.
You tell them 1014. 1014. Jesus loves me. Ready? Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so.
Let us sing. If the skies above you are gray, you are feeling so blue. If your cares and burdens seem great the whole day through, there's a silver lining that shines in the heavenly land. Look by faith and see him, my friend, trust in his promises grand. Sing and be happy, press on to the goal. Trust him who leads you, he will keep your soul. Let all be faithful, look to him and pray. Lift your voice and praise him in song. Sing and be happy today.
First off, I want to give a good thanks to the elders for allowing us as men to do this. I really appreciate the opportunity. If I had to title this little lesson, it would be, It's Not Hard and Worth It. It's not hard and worth it. Christy and I have made many mistakes raising our kids. Some things we've done good, some things not so good. But all the things we've done, we've learned from. Bad or good, we've learned from it. That being said, we're going to look at something we can do to help our children and train our children up in the way that they should go to raise good Christian young people. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." What are some ways we can train up our children in the ways of God? Number one, us being Christians. Us being what we should be for God. We need to take time to read and study with our children the Bible. Letting them from birth to being grown see us participating in all things spiritual. They need to see us helping the church in every way possible, volunteering to help in ways we can help. I was talking to a young man who has a 5-year-old son. This young man's not married, but his mother takes this young boy to church. I told this young man he needed to go to church with her. He needed to be an example. He needed to be involved in the church and raise his son in the church. He needed to get involved in everything that goes on at church. He said, "Why should I do that?" I said, "So you can be a great Christian example to him." He turned and looked at me and said, "That's just too hard." Not really the thought process that I wanted him to have. I looked at him and said, "Is it worth it? Is he worth it?" Kind of the end of our conversation. I had to stand there for a minute thinking, wow, Proverbs 21 verse 21. "He who follows righteousness and mercy finds life, righteousness, and honor." Let me assure you, it's not too hard, and it's definitely worth it. Number two, we need to challenge ourselves to be an active part with our kids of things such as Latch the Leaders, camp, exposure, CYC, devotionals, lock-ins, Spook the Lake, game nights, and etc. Don't just send your kids, don't just send our kids, but go with them. Be a part. Show them that you're 110% vested in church and things of the church. And require them to be 110% invested also. Don't let them skip things of the church for any reason, ball, homework, or just because I really don't feel like going. I really don't want to go. No matter what we must do, no matter what energy we have to put out, no matter what sacrifices we have to make, let's make it our life's goal to see our children go to heaven and for us to go also. James 5:16, "The effective fervent prayer of the righteous avails much." We need to pray for our children. Pray that God will help them beat off the wiles of the devil. Pray that they will keep God first in their lives. Pray that God will help them through every struggle, no matter how big or how small. We need to pray for God to help us be a good example to them. Parents need to pray for each other because it's not a joke raising kids. It's tough. And as they get up into the teenage years, it's tougher. But we can do it. We can raise good kids. We can raise kids that want to be part of the worship. Let's recap. From birth to being grown, let them see us participating in all things spiritual. Even if it's out of our comfort zone to do it, let's get out of our comfort zone and show them the example. We need to lead them by example. Again, I haven't always been the best at this, so I'm preaching to myself. Number 2, don't just send our children, but go with them. It's not easy. It takes time, but it's worth it. Number 3, pray that God will help our children and us be the proper examples. Maybe we haven't put as much effort and energy in raising our kids as what we should. There is great news. It's not too late. We can start today and make a great change. Have you put on Christ in your heart? That's the start that they need. Maybe we haven't put enough energy and effort as we should. Mark 16:16 says, "He who believes will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned." To be a good example, not only to our children, but all those around, we need to become a Christian. Maybe you are a Christian, and maybe some things got in the way of your Christian life. Maybe we've taken hold of some things that the devil has. He wants to be a stumbling block, and he can be if we let him. Maybe there's some things in your life as a Christian that we need to do better. Maybe there's things that, as publicly as it's known, and come to Christ and ask for the prayers of the church, for the forgiveness of God. The person will forgive you, and God will too. Maybe it's just that you've run into some stumbling blocks in life. Maybe it's not sin. Maybe it's just tough situations that you're going through. Listen to me. Our God is bigger than any situation or any sin that you could possibly put yourself in. Our God can forgive any sin that we committed. Don't let the devil tell you, I've done so much that God just won't forgive me, but he will. If you have any need for this congregation to pray for you, if you have need for God to forgive you, please come right now and let's stand and let's sing.
It is a pleasure to see each of you here tonight. Barry, we appreciate those words that you gave to us. Dale is going to be leading us in our prayer in just a moment. But again, we'd like to thank each of you here to the East Walker Church of Christ. We have a few updates to our prayer list that we need to make mention of or with O'Neill Skelton has been put on hospice. So if you would be keeping him and their family in your prayers, I guess they're getting started just into the process. So pray for them that they can make those adjustments. Also would like you to keep my family again in your prayers. Kim's supposed to be coming home tomorrow, so pray that she can get back safely and maybe stay for a while this time. We also need to make mention of this next weekend is going to be our Ladies' Day. So ladies, be aware of that, and I guess be letting everybody know. We're also going to be having a cleanup day here at the building this weekend. See Stephen about that. I guess we've got some things that need to be taken care of, as well as the cleanup day or the work day at ICYC. So keep both of those in your plans for the coming weeks. Also, April 26th, there's going to be a youth day at Midway. There's a sign-up list on the Welcome Center for that. This is for youth, and there's going to be adult classes as well. So, like Barry said, parents, if you want to go and show your support, you won't just have to, I guess, sit in the car or wait for the kids to be done. You'll have something you can be involved in as well. Remember, next, our March 10th will be Monday night for the Masters. March 23rd will be the area-wide Bible Bowl. That will be us hosting this, 2 p.m., bring snacks. Also that evening, we're going to be doing our question and answer night. So if you've already turned yours in, we're going to try to get through them that night. If not, we'll just roll them into the next one. So if you still have questions and you haven't turned them in, feel free to keep doing that, because hopefully we're going to keep this up for, I guess, until y'all run out of questions. So. All right, anything else we need to make mention of before we get? Okay. Oh my. Chad Salt. Okay, let's definitely keep him, and I guess that all of those involved in that in our prayers, that he can find some comfort from that. Anything else before we get started on it? Yes, ma'am. Oh yeah. Beverly's son is having some very bad back problems and is going to, I guess, try to get some of that taken care of. Having some blood work done with that as well. So pray for him that they can find some relief for him. Anything else before we're led in prayer? All right, Bill, if you.
Our God and our Father, we are so thankful for so many things. Thankful for the blessings you give us to be a part of this country where we have the freedom to come together, study your word, and to worship you. Father, we pray for our country, that we would make our way back to you again. Father, help us in every way we could. We pray for those who need your help so much, your healing power, that you would be with all those in our prayer list and stretch it tonight. And you find out that my brother O'Neill is going to the hospital, so you would be with him and his family. Father, so much sickness and so much tragedy in our congregation and also around the world. We pray that you would just bless people as only you can. We thank you so much for your son, who came and gave his life as the greatest gift we could ever have, so that our sins would be forgiven. And all this we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Classes can take their places. All right, good evening. We are continuing in the book of Esther. So if you've got your Bibles, if you would, open and turn there. Book of Esther. So I've got marked down that we got mostly through chapter 8. Does that sound correct to y'all? Mostly through it? Okay. All right, so Esther chapter 8. Let's go ahead and start, or we'll pick up around verse 10 in just a moment. I want to back up and set us up the story here again. So in the last chapter, we have had Queen Esther essentially beg for the Jews' forgiveness. She put her life on the line. It goes through. Haman is hanged and hung on the gallows. Mordecai is put in the position of Haman's, given the ring and all of those things. But at the beginning of chapter 8, Esther, the Jews are still in peril. So Esther comes before the king again, risking her life. Remember, he bows the scepter again. So she comes before him and says, look, we're going to be killed, destroyed. How are we going to escape this? The king, he doesn't really say, well, here's the answer to it. He just kind of says, okay, well, you and Mordecai figure out what to do. That's kind of the imagery that's given there. And I don't know, that's just kind of funny to me, just to think of, here's a king and he's about to destroy a people and his wife, and he's just like, well, just take care of it. It just seems like a very off-the-cuff, not really nonchalant kind of thing there, at least to me. All right, but let's go back, chapter 8, and let's start with verse 10. It says, and he wrote, this is Mordecai, wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's signet ring. He sent the letters by mounted couriers riding on swift horses. Now remember, that's the main difference between how this message was sent and the one before. This one was sent on swift horses, and the Jews got to hold the message or got to read it themselves. Verse 11, saying that the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed forces of people or province that might attack them, children and women included, to plunder their goods. So, what is the response? How are the Jews going to overcome this day of death? They are given essentially the exact same orders that we'll use the enemy, that's the phrase I'll use for that the enemies were going to use to destroy them. They were going to destroy, annihilate, kill, and plunder and take everything. Haman, had already kind of set it up with the king to pay him off. And now the Jews are given this edict: whoever comes against you, you fight for your life. Now, remember, before this, it was the edict of kill the Jews, destroy them, take them, whatever you destroy, whatever you capture from them, you can take. And now the Jews have the exact same message. Now, rough time period, 2 months-ish, that the Jews have been waiting in fear for their entire nation. Haman's edict to destroy them had been put into effect about 2 months before, and about 9 months left to go till it goes into effect. So the thought is, we're scared for our lives. We don't have any hope of salvation. We don't have any way to fight back. And now, because Esther aligned herself with the Jews, she showed herself to be a descendant of Abraham, to be in our family. She's begged for our life, and now we have this chance at survival. Continue on verse 12. And one day throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of what was written was to be issued as a decree in every province, being publicly displayed to all the people. And the Jews were to be ready on that day to take vengeance on their enemies. Now, what does that phrasing imply to you? That on that day they were to what? All right? Attack, defend, well, be ready, right? Put yourself in their position for a second. For 2 months, you've been hearing the nation's going to destroy you. The whole government is against you. You're about to be pushed underfoot, and everything that you have and worked for is going to be given to somebody else. And now it is, you can defend yourself. Now you can stand up and fight against those who would take from you. What would you do? Would you be ready? They've been given this message of deliverance. You can be saved, but you've got to prepare. So get your people together, get your weapons, maybe gather your families. And, again, think about what you would do in this. You've heard this message. Now we can defend, but we've got to prepare. So you've got 9 months. Let's make sure we know what's going on. Verse 14. So the couriers mounted using their swift horses that were used in the king's service, rode out hurriedly, urged by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel, the capital, starting and then, I guess, radiating out to the entire kingdom. Now, verse 15, we have Mordecai. Now, where was Mordecai supposed to be at this moment if Haman's plan had come to fruition? He would have been dead a day or two ago, right? Or before this instance. So now he's standing there. Haman went out in the presence of the king in royal robes, blue and white, great golden crown, white robe of fine linen, purple. City of Susa shouted, rejoiced. Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. I love the phrasing of that in verse 16. It's a short verse, but think about what all that is capturing. I want to equate it not completely, but I just want you to look at this comparison. Think about the joy that you gained the day the blood of Christ saved you from sin. The joy, the overwhelming honor, the awe, the thankfulness. Now these people, that's what they were feeling from a physical standpoint. They had been delivered from death. And so now they are joyful in Esther, joyful in Mordecai, joyful in the fact that God has delivered them. Verse 17. And in every province and every city, everywhere the king's command, the edict reached, there were gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday. Now, this was the one, the part that I asked you to think about. And many of the peoples of the country declared themselves Jews, for the fear of the Jews had fallen on them. Now, what does that mean? What had the nation or a lot of the people in the country decided to do? I'm going to be friendly with them because Mordecai's a Jew and he's, the second in command. Think about it from a political standpoint. All right? Maybe the people are like, well, I know who's in power now, so I'm just going to shift under, whoever's strongest. Those type of people, right? Maybe it's this understanding of the fear of what God is capable of. Maybe they looked at, the Jews are about to be killed, and now all of a sudden Queen Esther's a Jew, and Mordecai, the Jew that never bowed to Haman, now he's second in command. Maybe their God has something, or maybe there's something with their God. We don't know all the reasons, and some of them are probably righteously done. Some of them were probably converting to Judaism. Some probably were looking at it as a political maneuver to put them in the best position. For us, it doesn't matter. The point is, they go from the Jews are about to be destroyed, and now everybody is exalting them and lifting them up because of, again, what God was able to do through His planning. We as Christians are sometimes outcast and downtrodden, right? We sometimes are looked down on and hated by the world. But what do I do? What did Esther do? What did Mordecai do? What did those Jews who were commanded to be ready, what did they do? I don't know what the battle is that you have to fight. I don't know what what you need to do to prepare for the specific challenges you may face. But is God able to help us overcome whatever challenges I can face? Is God still in control no matter what? And that's what this book is telling us. And that's why I think it's so neat that the word God or none of the names of God are ever mentioned here, right? And yet God is so easily seen throughout the entirety of it. So, end of chapter 8, the nation is essentially flocking to the Jews, or at least coming to them and aligning themselves with them for whatever the reasons may be. Now, chapter 9. Now the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, the 13th day of the same, when the king's command and edict were about to be carried out. So we skip a period of time now. Mordecai has given out his edict to help the Jews. Now we are the day before this edict of the Jews' destruction is to be taken, to go into effect. So when the king's command were about to be carried out, now notice how it's phrased here. On the very day when the enemies of the Jews were hoping to gain mastery over them. That's the perfect way to phrase up what Haman was trying to do, right? He hated the Jews. He disliked them. Again, maybe his pride, ego, maybe some, family problems that had been passed down from the Amalekites. He wanted to destroy God's people. And what happened? Look at the very next 3 words or few words there. The reverse occurred, is how mine's phrased. How does the King James phrase that? Is that the same? Turn to the contrary. Same thought. It was supposed to be one thing, and what happened? The exact opposite, right? Any of you ever been in that situation before? Maybe you've planned and, had everything set up for one thing, and then you get there, and then what happens? It's completely opposite of what you expected. But again, think about what this is. This isn't just, maybe forgetting to pack a bag or, leaving the wallet at home, or this is the Jews were going to be destroyed. Satan was going to win, right? But with just a little tweak, just a little push, just God knowing where to put the right people, this whole situation is reversed. The next phrasing there is the Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. Do you want mastery over the people that despise you, that hate you, that say all manner of evil against you falsely and use you and despise you? What do? How do we do that? How do we have mastery over those who are against us? New Testament gives this idea of loving, praying, turn the other cheek, pray for them that despitefully use you, right? The imagery here is, in order for me to be what I need to be, I've got to submit to God. I'm not going to win the battle, right? It's not my strength, it's not my fight, or my abilities that it's going to win the fight. But it was Esther being in the right position. Esther being willing to stand up at the moment that she had and take care of the opportunity that she had. And because of that, the rest of this Jewish nation was saved. Now, like Mordecai said, if Esther hadn't done it, somebody else would come, right? God would deliver them in some way. For us, in our battles, in the things that we fight, and the opportunities that we find in our difficulties in life, Satan wants to destroy you, right? He wants the day to be a day that brings death. But what is God able to do? He can turn those days that Satan has built upon and worked to and, put all this effort in, and he can make it turn in our favor on a dime. That's the God we serve. That's the God that was in control here with Esther and with Mordecai. I want to take a step just for a second. There are hints of this thought listed throughout the book, mainly here at the end of chapter 8 and the beginning of chapter 9. And it goes along with the idea of the fear that came on them and why some of these people might have come to the Jews. You remember how we started off with the idea that these people were very superstitious You know, they cast the lots, they drew straws to figure out when they should destroy the Jews. They would consult the stars and this and that to figure out their plans, right? All their plans that they've done, all of the, you know, asking their gods, all of the rolling of the dice to figure out what the best day is, all of this. And God just takes care of it. A lot of these people that feared the Jews probably came to God because they were like, well, how can we fight against a people whose God can do that? How can I work against the Jews when their God is able to secretly put Esther in this position and then reveal her at the exact moment that she's needed? So for them, a lot of it might have been, well, superstition, coincidence, and so I'm going to find the spot of safety for me.
You can see so much in God's plan here, and it wasn't just Mordecai and Esther. I even look at Xerxes, because Xerxes knew, he said, I think he had second thoughts about signing that Declaration of Star. But he knew he couldn't change it. There was no way. Not even he could change it. So, given that power to Mordecai, saying, you and Esther worked it out, and having Mordecai with the ring, Mordecai was smart enough to be able to fight fire with fire. And still, it did not go against the king's edict.
Absolutely. And I think this is I don't know how quite to apply this or say this in a way to maybe get across what I'm saying is, but Esther and Mordecai were living in a very worldly position, weren't they? A very hedonistic, worldly kingdom. And yet they seemed to be faithful, didn't they? So maybe there's some application for that to us. Maybe it's not that I have to, separate myself completely from the world, right? Because Esther didn't have a choice on where she was at the moment, or how she got there anyway. I might not be able to control some of the things in my life, right? Where I find myself, the people are against me, the laws maybe that the government has placed over my head. But is God always going to come out on top? No matter how bleak or dark or, what's the imagery there? Destroy, kill, and annihilate. God can overcome those things. Now, let's skip down to verse number 5 now in chapter 9. It says, the Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. Now, essentially this is just saying, everybody that came against them, anybody that caused them harm or threatened them, what did the Jews do? They took care of the problem. Now, some will look at this and they will see this as a cruel thing, right? How could you why not let them live, right? Why not let them have a chance to be right and maybe make their life right with God, right? You heard anybody make that statement before, maybe use that phrasing? These people are described as what? Not me saying it, but what are the words used to describe these people? Enemies, adversaries, those that hate us. This isn't somebody that's just going to say, well, we had a misunderstanding, you go your way, I'll go mine, and I won't try to kill you anymore. That's what it is. It's this idea of, well, if you wrong me, I might come back later and wrong you in the middle of the night, right? Remember, we have Haman, who has that family lineage back to the Amalekites, where some of this animosity toward the Jews might have come from. We have all of these things working against in tandem, this chaos of the world, and God takes care of it all. Beautiful book of the chaos and distress and difficulty that we as Christians or godly people might face in the world. But if we will stand up and do what's right or do what's necessary in the instance, maybe it's not bowing, maybe it's risking our life to stand before the king. Maybe it's enduring the hardship of losing parents or loved ones or the difficulties of life to get us where God needs us to be for something else. The point is, I am not in control. You aren't in control, but who is? It's God. And God can always make things come out for good for him. Now, continue on verse number 6 now. In Susa, the citadel itself, the citadel itself, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, and also killed, I'm going to skip all these names, but these are the names of Haman's son, enemy of the Jews. But notice what they did at the end of verse 10. They killed all these people in the citadel, 500, including these sons of Haman. But what did they not do? They didn't take their things. Now, did they have the authority to do that? Absolutely. The king, Mordecai, this thing, you defend yourself and you take whatever those people that are coming against you, you plunder. But the Jews said, nope, we don't want it. Now, I'm going to make some notes on that, but I want to read through it and see a few things first. All right, verse 11. That very day, the number of those killed in Susa, the citadel or the capital, reported to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther, in Susa, the citadel, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, and also the 10 sons of Haman. Now here's the question the king asks. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? This seems to be posed as, maybe an alarming thing. Well, here in the capital, there were 500 men that were willing to go against the king's second in command. That seems to be what the king's act. Even here, that many people were willing to go against me. So, second part of that. Now, what then have they done in the rest of my province? What is your wish, and it shall be granted to you? And what further is your request, and it shall be fulfilled? It's almost like he's saying, 500 men here were killed. Okay, queen, what else do you want? That's just 500, right? You see, for him, he's still focused on his queen. He's still focused on the idea she's what matters. Now, go back to what Haman said, right? He was trying to talk about how it was a bad thing for the king to lose people, right? He didn't want to make the king suffer loss because of the vengeance that Haman wanted. But now the king's standing there, he's like, well, we lost 500. Okay, Esther, what else do you want? It's almost like he's saying, well, if that's not enough, let's go out and let's make sure we take care of the issue again. Because look at what she comes back and says then. Verse 13. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict. And let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. So the king commanded this to be done, and a decree was issued in Susa. 10 sons were hanged, and the Jews who were in Susa gathered also on the 14th day of the month of Adar. They killed 300 men. But what did they not do? They did not plunder what was from those who came against them. So the thought is, Queen Esther said, King, let us have tomorrow as well. Let us be able to stand and defend ourselves also. Now, I don't know if she had maybe some extra information. She seemed to know what she was asking there, because what do they have to do the next day? 300 more men are killed. So in the capital, 800 are put to death because they are going against the Jews. Esther is just like, King, just let us keep defending ourselves. Don't want anything special. Don't want the plunder, right? We just want to be able to survive. Now, verse 16. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also gathered to defend their lives and got relief from their enemies and killed 75,000 of those who hated them. Now, out of this entire nation, 75,000 were killed. Now, that's a pretty big number for us, right? Think if someone in Birmingham just said, hey, we had an event where 800 people were killed. Would that be a big thing for us? Would that make the news? For them, the king is like 75,000. That's really not a lot compared to his entire nation. At this time, his kingdom would be somewhere between 20 and 30 million people. This guy didn't really care about people. He cared about his kingship. The point for making note here of how many people are killed is, what did they do after that? They didn't take any of the plunder, right? That's where we're leading to, right? It's that here is, even if it's the poorest of people, don't you think these 76,000, if you add in the other 800-ish, don't you think there was some wealth in there? Well, maybe some land, maybe cattle, maybe herds. I'm sure there's something, right? But the Jews didn't want any of it. Now, we're not really given any information in this as to why they don't want it. But I think the impact that's being made is, go back to Haman. Haman was telling his people, kill them and take everything. That was his incentive to get people to go out and kill Jews, or one of them. But what are the Jews doing? Why are they fighting? Are they fighting for money or wealth or hatred? I'm fighting for my life. I'm fighting so that I can live, so that my kids can live, so that, you see the difference here? One's for money or influence, or, depending on the people that we're fighting. And the other is, we simply want to be. As God's people, we shouldn't care about things in this world, right? God has enough wealth and power and influence to sustain us, right? I don't need what the world has to offer. Maybe that's the indication of the impact that's being made here. Haman's motivations and reasoning, it's not the motivation that the Jews had. All right, let's look at the end of, not the end, verse 19 here. It says, therefore the Jews of the village who live in the rural towns hold the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day for gladness and feasting, as a holiday, as a day that they send gifts and food to one another. I love this, right? Here are these people that for however long Haman has been harassing and hurting them. 2 months of just pure fear, right? Of, we can't defend ourselves. Another 9 months of, can we defend ourselves? Are we going to be strong enough to fight off these people? And now, what has the day turned into for the Jews? It's a special day to get with family and have fun, to give gifts, to feed each other. That's what it's become to them. It was a day of sorrow and terror and fear. And now that day that was so terrible is now this day of great rejoicing, right? Here's where I want to make the application of Jesus and his sacrifice and the joy that's gained through that. In Esther, I think we have this beautiful image of salvation, of being in a place of the Jews not being able to escape, not having a way out. And God, through his providence, through his infinite wisdom, sets up the dominoes perfectly, right? None of us could do that. You think about the upheaval and the change and the confusion that's going on in this city throughout this time. And when everything shakes out, where does Mordecai stand? He's not on the gallows. He's not just sitting at the door anymore, not bowing to Haman. He's got the king's ring on. Go back to the end of chapter 8, the 15, and so the fine liniments, the robes, the royal crown. That is what God can do for us. Not necessarily spiritually, not necessarily physically, but spiritually. It's this understanding that I can't make it out of this world on my own, right? I can't go against the adversary, those that hate me. Well, I can, but I can't win. The edict has been given, right? Death awaits those who have sinned. But there's also the edict of, if you come unto me, lay your burdens down, right? Then I'll give you rest. It's this beautiful picture of how we have this physical deliverance in Esther, of God's providence, of His taking care of, allowing them to live their lives and have the problems and the things that life brings. But God being there for them in the moments that they needed them, the moments that only God could control or know what needed to happen. Skip down to verse 26. It says, therefore, they called these days Purim, after the term Pur. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, so he's referring either back to this entire book that we've just read, or in verses 20 through 23, there's the idea of another edict that's gone out. Either way, it's this understanding, this message of what happened in the book of Esther is being distributed. We call these days Pur, therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, and of what they had faced in this matter, and what had happened to them, the Jews firmly obligated themselves and their offspring, all who joined them, that without fail they would keep these 2 days according to what was written and the time and appointed every year. This became an everlasting thing, essentially. 2,500 years now, and guess what the Jews still do on the day of Purim? I've got let me get through this and I'll read this. I've got an outline of what they do on that day, and it's kind of hilarious or funny what they do to still speaking about Haman in a negative way. But it's this idea that to this day, the Jews remember how God delivered them. On the 13th and 14th of Adar, I want to say that's sometime in June or July for us, the Jews will gather together and they will remember what Esther did for them. They will remember what Mordecai went through and how he was put in that place of, or moved from a place of submission to that second in command. What has God done for you that you can remember? Do we have any days or events that we can latch on to remember that maybe help us to remember to be joyful? What do we do on the first? One of the things we do on the first day of the week, we partake of communion, the Lord's Supper. Most of the tables have what written on them? That do this in remembrance. We partake of that, the unleavened bread, the grape juice, to remember what Jesus did, right? How he hung on a tree, how he shed his blood, how his body was broken for something I did. My sins, my problems, my faults. Because of the hatred of Haman, the Jews faced destruction. They had no way to escape it, just like we have no way to escape sin by ourselves or in and of ourselves. But God is powerful, isn't he? God is able. Philippians 4:13, what is it? I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. Put yourself in Esther's position just for a moment. We're about to wrap up. And think about right before you head in to the king's presence that first time. You've been fasting and praying for 3 days. Imagine what you would have prayed if it was you in that position. Imagine the thoughts that you would have thinking, I'm about to die. I'm about to be put to death because I disrupted decorum of the king's court. But why did she go? What was the motivation that kept her feet moving? That kept her talking in that situation? If I don't speak, God's still going to deliver. But like Mordecai said, then my family is going to be lost. God's going to win, isn't he? Everybody shake your head, yes. That's not a question. God's going to win, yes? Yes. Okay. The question is, where am I going to be in relation to him when he wins? Haman thought he won, right? Haman thought, I've got everything set up, all until that one night when the king couldn't sleep. And that's all it took for this whole process to get started. Well, not all it took, but it's this thought that, again, we are not in control. We might not know what's going to happen, but we serve a God that does. Now, like I said, I've got a few minutes. Yeah, here we go. All right. This is a record of what the Jews do to this day on the day of Purim. And like I said, it's kind of funny. It says the Feast of Purim was kept on the 14th and 15th days of the month, commemorating Esther and the Jews by her desire before she adventured into the king's presence. On the night of the 14th, when the stars start to appear in the sky, they will read Esther 1-4, reading up until that moment of them coming before the presence of the king. And then, when Haman's name starts to be mentioned in the story, guess what everybody does? They shout out, essentially, let's blot his name out, rip his name out of the book. This is, I'm going to say, heartwarming to me. Because think about what these Jews who were facing Haman's wrath. Haman wants to kill our children. He wants to destroy all of our future. He wants to take it away from us. And now, even though the Jewish nation is not the nation of God anymore, 2,500 years removed, they still sing about how Haman was such a horrible guy and how he was against God, and about how God overcame him. It's just funny to me because he worked so hard, so diligently to try to get his ego to be appeased, to try to make himself feel good. And now what do children do 2,500 years in the future? Remember how bad he was. What are we doing tonight, and what have we done for the last few months? We've made note of how Haman was a bad individual, about how he had a bad attitude, and how we're glad he met the end that he did because it saved God's people. God's in control. Again, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I have a guess, I have futures, I have plans, but God is in control. From Esther, learn God's in control. That's essentially what this whole book is about, or at least from my standpoint. The name, the word, God's not even mentioned, but he's found throughout the book guiding it. Chapter 10, we didn't get to that, but chapter 10, very quickly, I won't read it, but essentially it just goes on to say, here's who Azarias is, and here's what he sent out attacks and something like that. Chapter 10 essentially wraps up the whole story. It starts off in chapter 1 with him coming back from a failed military campaign. And he sends out this taxation on his people. And then at the end, in chapter 10, he sends out another one. So it kind of starts and stops with this idea of he's gathering money into himself. On the first one, the Jews are seen as detestable, as the outcasts. And now at the end of chapter 10, where do they stand? Everybody's flocking to them, right? They're the people that everybody wants to be around. They're the it thing at the moment. How could that have happened except God been in control? Appreciate your time and attention. Any thoughts or comments before we close for tonight? If you could, I am thinking for next week, since we finished up with Esther, going into Exodus, kind of piggybacking off our Genesis story and maybe trying to follow our way through the Old Testament. That's my thoughts. If y'all have any ideas or thoughts about it, let me know and I'll see what I can do with that. Again, I appreciate it.